I've got various commander decks, and I was playing against a Hearth Hall the other day. And Hearth Hall's activation is obviously if you sack lands, you lose 2 life. So when he sacrifices, can the sacrifice be taken back upon a cast that I would play? So he
So you're
had
saying like he sacrificed it and then you played something and he wants to take the land back? Is that what you're saying?
okay. There was 3 of us on board, and I think we all had like pretty high 20 life.
Okay.
And so he went to sacrifice probably, let's say, 14 lands to do the 28 damage.
Okay. Do you remember what he was using to sacrifice the lands?
I can't remember. He had cards in that deck that I didn't have. Um, it wasn't God Eternal Bond to. I know that one.
Okay.
But even if it was a case like God Eternal Bond to, so when that came in and the sacrifice happened, I casted this card here, which is called Flare of Fortitude, where it just says until the end of turn, my life total can't change, and permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. So I casted that to protect myself against the 28 life loss.
Sure.
Then the other players at the table said that because I played that, he was allowed to change his mind on the sacrifice.
Gotcha. All right, so let me look at this here. So God Eternal Bond 2, when it enters, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. When God okay. And then Hearthal has a trigger that says when you sacrifice a land, each opponent loses 2 life. So what happens is there's actually multiple things going on to the stack at the same time. So this is what it sounds like happened. Is that and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just kind of trying to interpret what you said and interpreting how the cards work and then go from there, right? So your opponent puts God Eternal Bond 2 onto the battlefield. God Eternal Bond 2 has a trigger. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice permanents. Now, they don't choose what to sacrifice until that trigger is resolving. So if he said I have God Eternal enter, I'm just going to end up sacrificing all my lands so that I kill everyone, and you go, oh, well, and if they did that quickly, then that means they haven't actually passed priority to try to resolve the trigger. They're just letting everyone know ahead of time, probably trying to shortcut the game and saying, you're all going to lose from this, At which point, just announcing the trigger going onto the stack, you could say, oh, well, I'm going to cast this Flare of Fortitude, and because he hasn't actually resolved the trigger yet, he could go, oh, well, then I'll just not sacrifice anything. Because he hasn't actually sacked him yet. He just declared his intent before the trigger was actually resolved. And if you did it then yeah, he could go back on what he said he was going to do. Now, here's another scenario. Is if God Eternal enters, trigger goes onto the stack, and everyone passes priority. Nobody takes an action. And then he goes, great, with this trigger resolving, I'm going to sacrifice 10 lands or however many, And because then he's going to sacrifice the lands and he's going to draw the cards as part of resolving that trigger.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Now, because he sacrificed all those lands, he's going to get, 10 Hearthal triggers or however many Hearthal triggers go on the stack that saw all of those lands get sacrificed. And you don't lose life yet. You are going to lose life when those triggers resolve. So now, just like any other trigger, priority has to pass around. And if now you say, oh, with the Hearthal triggers on the stack, I'm going to Flare Fortitude so my life total can't change. Correct. It is too late for him to take back the sacrifices because he's already resolved that. That was part of the God Eternal entering. He's already resolved that trigger. Now we're moving forward to resolving the life loss, and you go, well, in response to the life loss triggers, I'm gonna do this thing so that my life total doesn't change. Yeah, no, it's too late for him to take back the sacrificing.
And that's exactly what I thought.
Yeah, if that's the sequence that happened, then you're correct. It is in between after he's already made the choice to sacrifice, but before the life is officially lost. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and that's the way that I played it, and that's the way I interpreted it, and etc.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like, is that Ishtola?
It's Ishtola and the Wind Crystal.
Okay.
My question is, because Ishtola has the text. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with 3 or greater mana, Ishtola deals
2 damage to each opponent, you gain 2 life. Yeah.
2 life. Does this? So I know there's actually 2 questions I have.
Okay. So is the first one about the cost reduction?
No.
Okay.
I know the cost reduction. I know how that works.
Okay.
It's Wind Crystal's second line. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure I get that. It's if I gain the 2 life, I would get 4 instead, correct?
So you wouldn't get it when you cast the Wind Crystal, because the Wind Crystal is not on the field in time to see you gain life.
Yeah, but once
the Wind Crystal is out, yes, any instance of life gain that you would have after that is doubled, right? So once the Wind Crystal is out, and let's say you cast a Windfall or something else with mana value 3 or more, right? And then Ishtola triggers, deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you would gain 2 life, but instead Wind Crystal looks at that and goes, actually gain 4. And so you deal 2 to everyone and you gain 4 in that instance. Yes.
Okay. Now my next question is it separate instances of gaining life for each opponent, or is it just the 2?
No, you're just gaining. No, so you could be in a game of 20 players. You're going to deal 2 damage to each opponent, but you're still only going to gain 1 instance of 2 life, or with Wind Crystal and play 4 life.
Okay. Cool, because this deck is a lot of, gaining life. This is like the best synergy card I have in this deck.
Yeah.
Because I'm not very good at deck building, to be honest. This is just the pre-con, and I've only thrown in a couple upgrades.
Okay.
And I saw this lobby, and I was like, you know what, this would be the best time to ask some questions, because I also have Tidus right here. And in Tidus, I have the Earth Crystal, which does the doubles the counters, twice as many counters instead. What was I going to say about that? I'm going on tangents. I am so sorry. I can't remember what I was going to go with for that. Okay. When that happens, it's just 1 instance of counters, correct?
Yeah, so if 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on the creature instead. So if you have something that says, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, right? Mm-hmm. Wind Crystal will look at that. Earth Crystal will look at that, see those 2 counters as 1 instance of putting 1 or more counters on it, and replaces that number with twice that many. So it's not putting an additional, it's not a separate effect that puts more counters on it. It changes the number of counters that the original effect is putting on. So if it would have put 2 on, it's going to put 4 on instead as 1 instance of that many counters.
Okay, because I just got these decks back, and I've been trying to learn how to play them again. And I've been having issues with the rules, and people will call me out on it, and I feel really discouraged. It makes me hard. It makes it hard for me to play because I want to play correctly.
Yeah.
But that helps a lot. I'm gonna stick around and think if I have any other questions. So
okay. Yeah, you're welcome to stick around for sure.
That's interesting. Didn't know that. Last thing I've got for you, Yue the Moon Spirit. So most of my, as far as I'm aware, most waterbending can be cast at instant speed. They're just mana abilities. UA the Moon Spirit requires you to tap UA. Does that change its speed?
I think it's what? Tap it and waterbend 5, I think it is.
Waterbend 5 to cast a non-creature spell
from your hand without paying its cost. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So by default, activated abilities, and an activated ability is any ability that has formatted of cost : effect. Right? That's an activated ability. By default, all activated abilities can be cast anytime you have can be activated anytime you have priority, which is commonly known as instant speed, right?
Okay.
And it doesn't matter what the cost is, and obviously unless it says activate only as a sorcery. Tapping it has no bearing on when the timing of when you can activate it, except for summoning sickness. That's the only restriction that tapping it now puts on it, is if UA is a creature and has summoning sickness, then no, and that has nothing to do with timing. That has everything to do with not being able to pay the cost of tapping. Right? Summoning sickness prevents it. But once summoning sickness is gone, no, I could tap it anytime I want that I have priority. Yeah.
I do think it's also kind of interesting with waterbending that you could tap a summoning sick creature because you're not actually tapping itself.
Because it's not using its own tap symbol.
Right.
Yeah. All right, cool. What's up?
Okay. I have a question about the distinction between dying and going to the graveyard and put into the graveyard. It has to do with both oldly written cards, for example, like when this creature goes to the graveyard, create a zombie, right? Those kind of cards.
Right.
But specifically the card Sefris, because Sefris apparently does not see itself die and does not venture into the dungeon when she dies, while similar cards that say that when one or more creatures are put into the graveyard, they would trigger death trigger. So I'm curious what the distinction is.
Yeah, and there's actually there's 2 words on Sefris that make the distinction.
Okay.
So the 2 words are from anywhere. Okay. So here's the thing. When it comes to zone changing triggers, right? Triggers that care about a zone change. When something is put into exile, when something is put into, wherever, right? When something goes to the graveyard, when something dies, all of that, it looks specifically at going from one zone to another. So when something dies is to be put from the battlefield into the graveyard. That's to die, right? So the older cards that say when this creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, or just says is put into the graveyard, and what I would also recommend is to double check like Scryfall to see if it's been errated to more conventional, more recent text, right? Because some of those do get cleared up when you look at the errata text of older cards. But if something just says goes from one zone to another, right, or just like that, then in your reference to like Sefris, those things trigger from the zone they started in, right? That's why multiple things dying at the same time see each other for the purpose of any triggers that they have.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Blood Art. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Because they all see each other while they're on the battlefield, and they all touch the graveyard at the same time. But so that's why they all see each other. Sefris's trigger is very different. It's if something says put into the graveyard from anywhere, it doesn't trigger in the zone that it came from. It triggers in the graveyard. So while it is in the graveyard, right? So let me give you another example of an interaction that works this very specific way. Okay. So back in Modern Horizons 3, there was a commander that came out that cared specifically about Lurgoyfs. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Disa,
exactly. Now, Disa, the important part of Disa's trigger says whenever a Lurgoyf permanent is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield.
Yeah.
Right? So, and there's those words again, from anywhere, right? That means it triggers from that permanent being in the graveyard, not from that permanent leaving the battlefield or leaving the hand or any of the other types of triggers that use similar wording. It triggers from anywhere, meaning it is in the graveyard and now the trigger happens, right? There's an artifact called Ashes of the Fallen that says all of the creatures in your graveyard are the chosen creatures. Like, as it enters, you choose a creature type, and it specifically turns all the creatures in your graveyard into that chosen creature type. So what that means is, if I have an elf in my hand and I discard it, although it was an elf in my hand, the moment it touches the graveyard, it is now a Lurgoyf, because that's the creature type I chose. And Disa will see that, because it triggers from the creature being in the graveyard. And we'll see it in the graveyard as a Lurgoyf, right? So that's kind of that same thing. So
Hold on. For example, sorry to interrupt, but if, let's say, your elf was on the battlefield, would it also die as a Lurgoyf? I assume it won't.
No, because dies triggers look at the last known information of how it existed on the battlefield.
All right.
So if I have something that says all of my creatures on the battlefield are elves, for example, and then I have triggers that care about elves dying, even if I had a non-elf die as an elf, that trigger sees it because it existed on the battlefield as an elf. Right? Even though it would be something else in the graveyard. So that's the difference between those triggers, between dies triggers and put into the graveyard from anywhere triggers. So dies triggers look at the last known information of how it existed on the battlefield. Put into the graveyard from anywhere triggers look at the last known. Look at how it exists in the graveyard because it triggers in the graveyard. Let me give you one more example to kind of drive this home. So, let's say I have something. All right. Let's say I have a Blightsteel Colossus on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Okay. And you play a Dress Down. Dress Down makes all creatures on the battlefield lose all abilities. Right? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then you play something that says everybody has to sacrifice all their creatures. Right? So Blightsteel Colossus is getting sacrificed. Absolutely. So Blightsteel has a replacement effect that says if it would be put into the graveyard, shuffle it into your library instead, right?
Yeah.
Well, on the battlefield, right before it would go to the graveyard, where that replacement effect would take place, it doesn't have any abilities. So Blightsteel Colossus goes directly into the graveyard and doesn't get shuffled, because it didn't have the replacement effect to shuffle itself as it was going to the graveyard. Okay.
But this is a trigger that says when it is put
it's not
into
a trigger.
the graveyard from
No,
anywhere,
it's
right?
it's not a trigger. It's a replacement effect that says if it would be put into the graveyard.
Okay.
So that's where it has to have that ability before actually touching the graveyard, right? Now let's look at a different one though. I think Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, if I'm remembering the name correctly, is the Eldrazi that, like, when you cast it, you draw 4 cards, and then but it says if it is put into whenever it's put into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle your graveyard into your library, right?
Yeah.
So same situation. You have Kozilek on the battlefield, and a Dress Down is played, causing Kozilek to lose all of his abilities. Okay? And then everyone has to sacrifice all their creatures. Kozilek goes into the graveyard. In the graveyard, it has all of its abilities. And because its ability says is put into the graveyard from anywhere, it triggers inside of the graveyard.
Okay.
Even though it didn't have abilities on the battlefield, that's not where it triggers. It triggers inside of the graveyard.
Interesting. All right. Would that also be... You're hitting on a second question that I want to ask, so I'll ask it now. Does that also apply if the Kozilek was morphed the moment it dies?
Actually, yeah, because same reason. Same thing as like if the Blightsteel Colossus was manifested, right, face down. Mm-hmm. And it has to die manifested, it doesn't get to apply its replacement effect because it didn't have the replacement effect as it died, right? So same thing here now with the Kozilek. If Kozilek is manifested face down, so it's a 2/2 creature with no abilities, no other characteristics other than being a 2/2 creature, it dies, but as soon as it changes zone, so in the graveyard, it is now face up and triggers itself in the graveyard.
Right. All right.
So it's because of those 2 key words, from anywhere.
Okay, and Sefris I mean, it's not entirely correct to say so, but it basically gives that something to your other creature cards wherever they are, except for on the battlefield. Or
It's not that it gives it, it's just a matter of where it looks to see
Yeah.
the trigger. And because, and so to your point from earlier, if Sefris were to die, by the time Sefris would see something in the graveyard, it is in the graveyard and no longer has that relevant ability. Because static abilities of a permanent have to be on the battlefield to be in effect, unless it says otherwise.
Right. All right. So the from everywhere thing causes the location of the trigger to be different. If I can
Right.
summarize.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. If it doesn't say from anywhere and it's just a dies trigger or is put into the graveyard, it triggers from the battlefield. If it says from anywhere, then it triggers from within the graveyard.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But functionally, there's no distinction between from the battlefield and dies. Am I correct about that one?
Correct. So put into the graveyard from the battlefield is just old text for dies. Dies
yeah.
literally means just is put into the graveyard from the battlefield.
Yeah. And put into the graveyard from anywhere is another distinct one. All right. All right.
Yep.
It's going to be very difficult to explain it, but I understand myself.
Here's the simplified version. I gave you like the overcomplicated, like fully fleshed out, but if I'm like in the middle of a game and I have to explain this and I don't want to take 20 minutes to do so, the thing I focus on is the words from anywhere. So if it doesn't say from anywhere, it triggers in the zone that it was in. If it says from anywhere, it triggers from inside of the graveyard.
Okay.
Those are the key differences between those two.
Yep. Right. Yeah, that's clear. Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to help.
Mosswort Bridge.
Yeah. Hideaway for when you have creatures power 10 or greater.
My whole thing is when I used Mosswort Bridge, or when I played it, I put a 1 ring underneath it.
Yeah.
Now everybody on that table was all like freaking out or they didn't see it until I played it with the
Mosswort Bridge, right?
Yeah. So they were like, oh no, but it doesn't have the effect because 1 ring says it needs to be cast.
Yeah.
But Mosswort Bridge says you may play exiled card without paying its mana cost, blah blah blah.
Sure.
It should still trigger, correct? Did I still get the cap?
Yeah. So what they're thinking of is something that says put into play. Right. So like Kadama of the East Tree has a trigger that when you have a permanent enter, you can take another permanent from your hand with equal lesser mana value and put it directly into play. And it's worded a little different, but that's basically what it says, right? So in that instance, you're not casting the thing from your hand, you're just putting it into play. Now, Mosswort Bridge is worded the way that it is because to play, this allows you to like hide away a land under there and play it. So the verb to play in Magic terms either means to play your land for turn or to cast a spell. It's just umbrellaed under the term play. So in that instance, you did cast the 1 ring, even though you didn't cast it traditionally from your hand, you still cast it. And so if it's allowed to resolve and enters, and you get the ETB trigger and gain protection until your next turn. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because they were all just freaking out about like, oh no, but the Mosswort Bridge says play the card, and I was like, oh yeah. Anyway, thanks for that. Have a good one.
Yeah, no problem. You too.